What happens when one of the most famous royals in the world sits down for what should be a lighthearted late-night interview and turns it into an absolute disaster? In just 36 seconds, a single comment would trigger a meltdown so explosive that it would end with security escorting a prince off the set. This is the story of the night Jimmy Kimmel had to kick Prince Harry off his show. The evening started like any other taping of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry was the guest everyone wanted to see. He walked out onto the stage wearing a crisp navy suit, waving to the crowd as they erupted in applause. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, extending his hand with that warm smile he's known for. "Welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for being here," Jimmy said as they shook hands. Harry took his seat, adjusting his jacket. "Thanks for having me, Jim." Jimmy chuckled. "It's Jimmy, actually." Right. Jimmy." Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs in a way that seemed almost too casual. The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Jimmy asked about life in California, about adjusting to a new country. Harry gave practiced answers, the kind he'd probably given 100 times before. But there was something in his tone, something a little sharp around the edges that Jimmy seemed to pick up on. "So I have to ask," Jimmy said, flipping his note cards. "You've been pretty vocal about wanting privacy, but you've also done quite a few interviews, written a book, done a documentary series. How do you balance those two things?" The audience went quiet. It was a fair question, the kind any good interviewer would ask. But Harry's expression changed immediately. His jaw tightened. "Well, Jimmy, I think there's a difference between controlling your own narrative and being hunted by photographers, don't you think?" Absolutely. Jimmy nodded, trying to keep things light. "I'm just curious about where you draw that line." "The line," Harry said, his voice taking on an edge, "is when people like you try to twist things." The audience stirred. Jimmy's eyebrows went up slightly, but he kept his composure. "People like me? I'm just asking a question." "You're asking a loaded question. There's a difference." Jimmy set down his cards. "Okay, well, let me ask something else then. You've talked a lot about mental health, which is great, really important stuff. But some people feel like you've also aired a lot of private family business in public. What do you say to those people?" Harry uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. "What do I say to them? I'd say they don't know what it's like to be trapped in a system that protects the institution over the people in it." "Sure, but," Jimmy said carefully, "your family can't really respond publicly, can they? Doesn't that put them in a tough spot?" "They've had plenty of opportunities to respond," Harry shot back. "They chose silence." "Or maybe they chose dignity," Jimmy offered, still keeping his tone friendly, but not backing down. That's when things started to shift. You could feel it in the room. The audience wasn't sure whether to laugh or gasp. Harry's face flushed slightly. "Dignity? You want to talk about dignity? My family leaked stories about my wife to the press. They threw her to the wolves. But sure, let's talk about their dignity." Jimmy took a breath. "Look, I'm not here to defend or attack anyone. I'm just having a conversation." "No, you're not," Harry said, his voice rising. "You're doing what all you American talk show hosts do. You act friendly, you make jokes, but really you're just setting people up." The audience was completely silent now. Jimmy glanced at them, then back at Harry. "I've been doing this for a long time, and I promise you, I'm not setting anyone up. I ask my guests questions. That's the job." "Your job is to get ratings," Harry snapped. "Don't pretend it's anything more noble than that." Jimmy's expression hardened just a fraction. "Okay, you know what? You're right. Part of my job is to make a show that people want to watch. But I also try to treat my guests with respect. Which is more than I can say for how you're treating me right now." Harry stood up. Actually stood up from his chair. "How I'm treating you. You invite me here and then ambush me with these questions." "Ambush you?" Jimmy stayed seated, looking up at Harry. These are normal interview questions. I've asked way tougher questions to presidents. Maybe because you're obsessed with tearing people down, Harry said, pointing at Jimmy. That's what this whole industry does. You build people up just so you can watch them fall. Jimmy finally stood up too. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here. Why don't we go to commercial, and we can reset? I don't need to reset, Harry said loudly. I'm perfectly fine. But you're the one who can't handle an honest conversation. An honest conversation? Jimmy's voice was still controlled, but firmer now. You came on my show, agreed to do an interview, and now you're mad that I'm interviewing you. I'm mad because you clearly have an agenda. My only agenda is to talk to you. That's it. Jimmy spread his hands out. What did you think was going to happen here? Harry turned to the audience. This is what I'm talking about. This is the problem. Everyone wants a piece of you. Everyone thinks they're entitled to your story, your pain, your private life. And when you try to set boundaries, they act like you're the problem. Someone in the audience clapped, but it was just one person, and it died out immediately. Jimmy shook his head. Nobody here thinks they're entitled to anything from you. You wrote a book. You did interviews. You put yourself out there. I'm just asking about the things you've already talked about publicly. You're twisting it, Harry insisted. I'm not twisting anything. You are. This is exactly what the British press did to us. I'm not the British press. Jimmy's voice rose for the first time. I'm a guy in Los Angeles trying to do a talk show, and you're being incredibly rude to me for no reason. Harry's face was red now. No reason? You've been attacking me from the start. I asked you how you balance privacy with publicity. That's not an attack. That's a question. The audience was dead silent. You could hear people shifting in their seats. Harry pointed at Jimmy again. You know what your problem is? You think because you have a platform, you can say whatever you want about whoever you want. You think you're untouchable. That's rich coming from an actual prince, Jimmy shot back. Former prince. You're still a prince. You just don't do the job anymore. Harry took a step toward Jimmy's desk. Don't talk about things you don't understand. Jimmy didn't back up. Then help me understand. Explain it to me. That's why you're here. I'm here because my publicist said it would be good for my image. Clearly that was a mistake. Well, we can agree on that, Jimmy said. The audience gasped, and then some laughed nervously. Harry's hands were shaking. You think this is funny? You think my life is some kind of joke for you to make fun of? I never made fun of your life. I asked you legitimate questions. Loaded questions. They're only loaded if you have something to hide. That did it. Harry's face went from red to almost purple. How dare you? How dare you suggest I'm hiding something? I didn't suggest anything, Jimmy said, his voice level again. You're putting words in my mouth. No, I know what you meant. I know your type. My type? Jimmy crossed his arms. What's my type? You're a parasite. You make your living off other people's stories, other people's pain. You don't create anything. You just feed off everyone else. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Someone shouted, "Whoa!" Jimmy's jaw clenched. Okay, you need to leave now. Excuse me? Harry looked shocked. You heard me. You need to leave my show. You can't kick me off. It's my show. I absolutely can. And I am. Jimmy gestured to someone off camera. We're done here. Harry laughed, but it was bitter. This is unbelievable. You ask insulting questions, and then you throw me out when I defend myself? You didn't defend yourself. You attacked me. There's a difference. Jimmy's voice was steady, but you could hear the anger underneath it. I've had thousands of guests on this show. Thousands. And I've never had to ask someone to leave. But you don't get to come here and call me a parasite and disrespect me on my own stage. I'm telling the truth. You're being a bully, Jimmy shot back, and I don't care who you are or what family you come from. Nobody gets to treat me like this in my own house. Security guards appeared from the side of the stage. 2 large men in black suits. Harry looked at them, then back at Jimmy. You're actually serious. Dead serious. Leave. Now. This is ridiculous. You're being completely unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable? Jimmy's voice rose again. You stood up in the middle of our interview. You've called me names. You've accused me of having some agenda against you when all I did was ask normal questions. And I'm the one being unreasonable? Harry looked at the security guards again. Don't touch me. Nobody's going to touch you, Jimmy said. But you are leaving. Fine, Harry threw his hands up. Fine. I don't want to be here anyway. This whole thing is beneath me. There it is, Jimmy said quietly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You think you're better than everyone else. I never said that. You didn't have to. It's in everything you do, everything you say. You want all the benefits of being famous, all the attention, all the platform, but none of the responsibility that comes with it. You want to be able to say whatever you want about whoever you want, but the second someone asks you a fair question, you fall apart. Harry's hands were in fists at his sides. You don't know anything about me. I know what you've shown me tonight, Jimmy said, and it's not good. The 2 men stood there, staring at each other. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the cameras humming. I'm going, Harry finally said, but you're going to regret this. I doubt that, Jimmy replied. Harry turned to leave, then spun back around. You know what? All of you people sitting out there, he gestured to the audience. You eat this up, don't you? You love seeing someone get taken down. Makes you feel better about your own pathetic lives. Hey, Jimmy stepped forward. Don't talk to my audience like that. They didn't do anything to you. They're part of the problem. All of you are, Harry was shouting now. This whole culture of celebrity worship and then tearing people apart. It's sick. You're all sick. Leave. Now. Jimmy's voice was ice cold. One of the security guards gently touched Harry's elbow. Sir, we need you to come with us. Harry jerked his arm away. Don't touch me. I said don't touch me. Nobody's touching you, the guard said calmly. We're just going to walk you out. I can walk myself out, Harry shouted. He turned and started walking toward the exit, then stopped and looked back at Jimmy one more time. You're going to pay for this. Do you understand me? You're going to pay. Jimmy didn't flinch. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Noted, Jimmy said flatly. Harry stared at him for another few seconds, then turned and stormed off the stage. The security guards followed behind him at a distance. You could hear his footsteps echoing as he disappeared into the wings. The audience sat frozen. Nobody knew what to do. Some people looked scared. Others looked confused. A few were whispering to each other. Jimmy stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then he turned to the audience. Well, he said, and you could hear his voice was a little shaky. That was something. A few people laughed nervously. Jimmy ran his hand through his hair. I've been doing this show for a long time, and I promise you, that has never happened before. Ever. More people laughed. And this time more genuinely. I want to apologize to all of you, Jimmy continued. You came here tonight expecting to have a good time, to see a fun interview, and instead you got, well, whatever that was. Someone in the audience yelled, "It wasn't your fault." Others clapped in agreement. Jimmy smiled, looking genuinely touched. Thanks. I appreciate that. I really do. He walked back to his desk and sat down. You know, I try really hard to be fair to everyone who comes on this show. I ask questions, sure, but I'm not trying to trap anybody or make anyone look bad. I just want to have a conversation. The audience applauded. But I also, Jimmy went on, I'm not going to let someone come here and disrespect me or disrespect you guys. I don't care who they are. There's a line, and that line got crossed tonight. More applause. louder this time. Jimmy looked down at his desk, then back up at the audience. All right, well, we still have a show to do. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to get myself together. And when we come back, we've got a musical guest who I promise will not call me a parasite. The audience laughed and cheered. We'll be right back, Jimmy said, and the cameras cut away. But before the feed cut completely, you could see Jimmy sitting there, shaking his head in disbelief. He looked tired. He looked frustrated. But mostly, he just looked disappointed. Backstage, you could hear raised voices. Harry was apparently still there, still arguing with someone. His voice carried through the halls. This is absurd. I'm not leaving until someone apologizes to me. Do you know who I am? A producer's voice, calm but firm. Sir, we need you to leave the building. Right now. I don't take orders from you. I don't take orders from anyone anymore. That's the whole point. Sir, please. No, I want to talk to Jimmy. He owes me an apology. That's not going to happen. Then I'm not leaving. There was a pause. Then the producer's voice again, quieter this time, so you had to strain to hear it. Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we will have to call the police. Is that what you want? A longer pause this time. Then Harry's voice, quieter, but still angry. Fine. Fine. I'm leaving. But this isn't over. Not even close. More footsteps. A door slamming. Then silence. Back in the studio, the audience was buzzing with conversation. People were on their phones, texting friends, posting on social media. Nobody could believe what they'd just witnessed. Jimmy sat at his desk during the commercial break, talking quietly with one of his producers. He looked shaken, but also resolute. Whatever had just happened, he wasn't backing down from it. When the show came back from commercial, Jimmy had composed himself. He introduced the musical guest with his usual enthusiasm, made a few jokes, got the audience laughing again. He was a professional, after all. The show must go on. But you could tell something had changed. There was a weight to the rest of the episode that hadn't been there before. A tension that lingered, even as Jimmy smiled and joked and kept things moving. During the final segment, Jimmy addressed what happened one more time. Before we go, he said, looking directly into the camera, I want to say something about what happened earlier. I know it was uncomfortable. I know it was weird. But I want you all to know that I don't regret how I handled it. The audience applauded. I believe in treating people with respect, Jimmy continued. All people. But respect goes both ways. And when someone crosses a line, when someone becomes abusive or threatening, I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to stand up for my staff. And I'm going to stand up for all of you. More applause, sustained this time. So thank you for sticking with us through that craziness. Thank you for understanding. And thank you for being the best audience in late-night television. The audience cheered and whistled. Good night, everybody. Jimmy waved as the show's theme music started playing. The credits rolled. The audience filed out, still talking excitedly about what they'd seen. Some of them were already being interviewed by news crews that had somehow materialized outside the studio. Inside, Jimmy sat at his desk for a few extra minutes after everyone had left. He was alone, except for a couple of crew members breaking down equipment. He looked exhausted. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through what were probably already dozens of messages and notifications. He put the phone down without responding to any of them. One of the crew members, an older guy who'd been with the show since the beginning, walked over. You okay, boss? Jimmy looked up and gave a tired smile. Yeah, I'm okay. That was intense. That's one word for it. For what it's worth, the crew member said, you handled it perfectly. Guy was completely out of line. Jimmy nodded. Thanks. I kept waiting for him to calm down, you know? I kept thinking if I just stayed calm, he'd realize he was overreacting. But he just kept escalating. Some people are like that. They're looking for a fight no matter what you do. I guess so. Jimmy stood up and stretched. All right, I'm going to head out. Long day. Get some rest. I'll try. Jimmy walked through the empty studio, past the cameras and lights and the desk where he'd sat across from thousands of guests over the years, past the spot where Harry had stood and shouted and pointed his finger. He paused there for a second, just looking at the chair where Harry had sat. Then he shook his head and kept walking. Outside, his car was waiting. He got in, nodded to the driver, and they pulled away from the studio. Inside the car, Jimmy finally let himself relax a little. See, he leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again, and again. Finally, he looked at it. Text messages from other late-night hosts, from friends, from his wife, all asking the same thing. Are you okay? What happened? He typed out a quick response to his wife. I'm fine. On my way home. Love you. He put the phone away again and looked out the window at Los Angeles passing by. The lights, the traffic, the billboards. Somewhere out there, Harry was probably in a car too, heading back to wherever he was staying. Probably still angry. Probably already talking to lawyers or publicists or whoever people like him talk to when things go wrong. Jimmy didn't care. He'd done what he had to do. He'd stood his ground. He'd protected his dignity and the dignity of his show. And if that made him the bad guy in someone's story, so be it. He could live with that. The car turned onto his street. Home was just a few minutes away now. His wife would be there, probably worried. They'd talk about it. She'd tell him he did the right thing. He'd believe her because she was always right about these things. Tomorrow, the internet would be on fire. People would take sides. Some would defend Harry. Some would defend Jimmy. Think pieces would be written. Hot takes would fly. But tonight, right now, all Jimmy wanted was to go home, hug his wife, and try to forget the strangest, most uncomfortable interview of his entire career. The car pulled into his driveway. Jimmy got out, walked to his front door, and went inside. Behind him, the door closed, and that was the end of it. It bring Teil. The night Prince Harry got kicked off Jimmy Kimmel Live. The night a simple interview turned into a full-blown meltdown. The night one of the most famous people in the world proved that fame and titles don't make you immune to consequences. Jimmy had asked fair questions. He'd stayed calm when anyone else might have lost their temper. He'd given Harry multiple chances to reset, to take a breath, to start over. But Harry had chosen anger instead. He'd chosen to lash out, to attack, to make threats. And in the end, he'd chosen to leave in disgrace, escorted by security, shouting at an audience that had done nothing wrong. It wasn't the interview anyone expected. It wasn't the interview anyone wanted. But it was the interview that happened. And Jimmy Kimmel, the late-night host who'd welcomed thousands of guests with warmth and humor and genuine curiosity, had finally met the one person who pushed him too far. Not because Jimmy couldn't take criticism. Not because Jimmy couldn't handle tough conversations. But because even Jimmy Kimmel has a line. And Prince Harry crossed it.